Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling explainable AI, or XAI, as the cool kids call it. We want to know more about this pairwise Shapley values thing everyone's talking about. And guess what? We got our hands on some awesome research that breaks it all down. It's really interesting stuff. And by the end, you'll totally see how it connects to like everyday things, even like buying a house or, even like developing life-saving drugs.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. I mean, you always hear people talking about how traditional AI is kind of like a black box, right? But this XAI, it's totally different. It's not just about like making things less mysterious. It's about like building trust and making sure AI is actually used fairly.
Right, yeah.
Like imagine, AI making these super important decisions, like in healthcare or finance, right? And we have no clue why.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary. That's what XAI is trying to fix.
Yeah, that is a little unsettling. I wouldn't want to be denied a loan and not even know why. So how does this XAI thing actually work? The research mentions something called feature attribution.
Oh yeah, feature attribution. That's like, shining a light on how the AI is thinking. It helps us figure out which factors, the features in the data, the AI is using to make its decisions. Think of it like, you're trying to figure out why your favorite dish tastes so good. But instead of like a recipe, we're looking at an AI's decision-making process.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So how do we actually measure which ingredients matter most? And the research keeps mentioning these Shapley values. Are they like super complicated?
Well, they sound complicated, but they're actually a really cool concept. They come from game theory, where you're trying to figure out like how much each player on a team contributed to winning, right? Well, in AI, we use Shapley values to figure out the importance of each feature that led to an AI's decision. Like let's say we're predicting house prices. Shapley values can tell us how much each feature, like square footage, location, the number of bedrooms, contributes to that final price estimate. It's like we can see what's driving the price up or down.
That's actually a pretty cool way to use game theory. It makes sense you'd want to know like what features an AI is using, especially for something as important as like throwing a house. But the research also mentioned a problem with traditional Shapley values, something about abstract baselines. What's that all about?
Ah, right. That's a really important point. So traditional Shapley values, they can be kind of tough to wrap your head around because they compare things to like an average, a baseline. It's kind of like comparing your cooking skills to some vague idea of like an average chef doesn't really help you like figure out your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, that's true. Like, it's like saying your cooking is better than the average person. Okay. But, like, what does that even mean?
Exactly. You need something more concrete, right? That's where pairwise Shapley values come in. So instead of this vague baseline, they compare things to uh, similar instances in the data. So instead of comparing your house to some like imaginary average house, we can compare it to a super similar house that, recently sold in your neighborhood.
So it's all about making those comparisons more, like, relatable, understandable. But wouldn't comparing my house to just one other house be, like, too narrow? How does that give us the big picture?
Well, that's where the power of this method really comes in, because we're not just comparing to one house, we're comparing to multiple similar houses in the data set. And this approach, it has some serious advantages. Number one, it makes the explanations way clearer, right? Because we're using real, tangible comparisons. And then also, it's so much faster to calculate because we're not messing around with these like vague baselines. And the best part is that it gives us like much more consistent results no matter how we choose those similar data points.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this new method is so exciting. But how does this all actually play out in the real world? Because the research talked about using this method in like some pretty different fields, right? Like
Yeah,
it talked about home prices, and then it also talked about the properties of polymers and even drug discovery.
it does. Yeah, those are all really interesting applications. Remember what we were talking about, feature attribution being like, figuring out the key ingredients in a dish?
Yeah.
Well, imagine applying that to like designing new materials or drugs.
Okay, that's a pretty wild thought. How does that even work?
Okay, so let's take polymers, for instance. Right? Scientists, they're always trying to design new polymers with specific properties, like strength or flexibility. Think about like the difference between a plastic bag and a bike helmet.
Right.
They're both polymers, but their properties are so different.
Yeah.
So where do pairwise Shapley values come in? Well, they can help us pinpoint which parts of the molecule are contributing most to those properties. It's like getting a molecular detective, pointing out which atoms or bonds are like the key players.
So instead of scientists just like blindly tweaking the molecular structure, they can use this method to like focus on the parts that actually matter.
Yeah, exactly. It can seriously speed up the process of designing new materials with, those specific properties. Now, think about applying this to drug discovery. Researchers, they're always looking for molecules that can target, specific diseases, right? Well, pairwise Shapley values can help identify which parts of a molecule are actually interacting with the virus or the bacteria that they're trying to fight.
So instead of like testing tons of molecules randomly, we can use this method to just zero in on the most promising ones.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is, and this is, just the beginning. What's really cool is that pairwise Shapley values, they don't just explain individual decisions, they can also give us a deeper understanding of how the entire AI model behaves.
Okay, so you've definitely piqued my interest. So how do we actually get these like deeper model insights? Like what kind of information can we get from that?
Well, for example, we can see if the model um, consistently favors certain features across, all of its predictions. This helps us make sure that, like, the model is learning what we actually expect it to learn. It's like taking the temperature of the AI's reasoning and making sure that it aligns with, like, our understanding of the world.
Wow, this is incredible. It sounds like pairwise Shapley values, they aren't just about explaining AI, they're also about refining it, improving our models. It's like we have this like amazing window into how the AI thinks and learns.
It really is, yeah. But it's important to remember that, like, no tool is perfect, right?
Yeah,
Pairwise Shapley values have limitations too, just like any other method.
that's a good point. So, what are some things we need to be cautious about when we use this method? Okay, so we've established that these pairwise Shapley values, they can help us understand why a house might be priced higher than another, like similar one, in the same neighborhood. But let's say we're looking at two houses and one's probably way higher than the other one. How do these values actually like break down the reasons for that difference?
It's like it gives you this super detailed breakdown. Let's say, one house has like an extra bedroom or a bigger backyard or it's closer to a park. Pairwise Shapley values, they'll pinpoint exactly how much each of those features is adding to that price difference. It's like having a magnifying glass, that lets you zoom in on the specific reasons why one house is worth more than the other.
So this is basically doing what like those professional appraisers do, but with even more data and precision. That's pretty cool. But the research, it also mentioned other cool concepts like normalized Shapley values. It sounds like Shapley values 2.0. What makes them different?
Yeah, you could say that. So normalized Shapley values, they basically give us a standardized way to compare the impact of each feature. So instead of just saying like an extra bedroom adds, a certain amount of money to the price, it tells us like the price increase per square foot of that bedroom.
So it's like getting a more like granular understanding of the value each feature adds.
Exactly. Like it helps us compare apples to oranges, so to speak. We can see which features give you the most bang for your buck, no matter, what their absolute values are. This could be super helpful when you're trying to understand those like complex decisions an AI is making.
That makes a lot of sense. The research also talked about something called directionality. What does that mean, like in this context?
Oh, directionality. Well, it helps us make sure the model is like making logical connections. For example, we know that like generally a bigger house is going to have a higher price, right?
Right.
Well, directionality checks if the model is actually reflecting that, common sense relationship. In other words, is it consistently giving a positive Shapley value to larger houses when it's predicting the price?
Oh, so it's like a sanity check for the model. We're making sure it's not like learning things that don't actually make sense in the real world.
Exactly. We want to make sure that the AI's reasoning lines up with, our understanding of how things actually work. And remember those beeswarm plots we were talking about? They can actually help us visualize those relationships across like the whole data set. Imagine a graph where each dot is a house and the color of the dot shows the price. These plots, they let us see those patterns and trends in how the model is assigning importance to the features. And we can confirm if it's, picking up on those expected relationships.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. So pairwise Shapley values, they give us those concrete comparisons. Normalized values let us compare the importance of different features, and directionality, make sure the AI is, making logical connections. It's like we're like peeling back the layers of how this AI makes decisions. But the research didn't just stop at home prices, right?
Nope.
What about those polymers and drug discovery examples?
Oh, yeah, those are some exciting applications, too. Remember how we were talking about feature attribution being like figuring out the key ingredients in a dish?
Yeah.
Well, imagine applying that same idea to, like, designing new materials or drugs.
Okay, now that's a pretty wild thought. How does that even work?
Okay, so let's take polymers, for example. Scientists, they're always trying to create new polymers with, like, very specific properties, like strength or flexibility, Like, think about the difference between, like, a plastic bag and a bike helmet.
Right, yeah.
They're both made of polymers, but, their properties are totally different.
Yeah, so how do pairwise Shapley values, like, come into play here?
So these values can pinpoint which parts of the molecule are contributing most to those properties. It's like having a molecular detective pointing out which atoms or bonds are the key players.
So instead of scientists just kind of like randomly tweaking the molecular structure, they can use this method to just focus on the parts that really matter.
Exactly. And this can really speed up the process of designing these new materials with the specific properties they need. Now, let's apply this to drug discovery, right? Researchers are always on the hunt for molecules that can target specific diseases. Well, pairwise Shapley values can actually help identify which parts of a molecule are actually interacting with the virus or bacteria, the thing they're trying to fight.
So instead of testing like thousands of molecules, just randomly, we can use this method to focus on the like best candidates.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. What's really fascinating is that pairwise Shapley values, they don't just explain individual decisions. They can give us a deeper understanding of how the whole AI model behaves.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention. So how do we get these deeper model insights? Like what kind of information can we actually get from that?
Well, for example, we can see if the model consistently, favors certain features across all its predictions. This helps us make sure the model is learning, what we expect it to learn. It's like taking the temperature of the AI's reasoning and making sure it lines up with our understanding of the world.
This is really cool. It sounds like pairwise Shapley values, they aren't just about explaining AI, they're about making those models better, refining them. It's like we have this like amazing window into how the AI actually thinks and learns.
Yeah, it really is. But, it's important to remember that no tool is perfect, right?
Right.
Pairwise Shapley values, they have their limitations too, just like, any other method.
That's a good point. So, what are some of the things we need to be cautious about, when we use this method? So, we've spent like the last two parts of this deep dive really getting into pairwise Shapley values and how we can use them to understand how AI makes decisions in, a whole bunch of different fields. But what does it all mean for the future of AI? Like, what are the big implications of all of this?
That's a really good question. And it gets to the heart of why this research is so important, making AI more transparent. It isn't just about satisfying our curiosity. It's about building a future where we can actually trust and rely on AI in a responsible way.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The more we understand about how AI makes decisions, the more confident we'll feel about using it in those really important areas, like healthcare or transportation or finance. But isn't there like a flip side to that? Like, if we can understand why an AI makes a mistake, does that also mean that like someone could be held accountable for those mistakes?
Absolutely. Yeah. Increased trust also means increased responsibility. Explainable AI, it forces us to ask some really tough questions about ethics and accountability. Like if an AI system misdiagnoses someone in a medical setting or a self-driving car gets into an accident, who's actually to blame? Is it the developers? The users? The AI itself?
Those are some like really heavy questions. I don't think there are any easy answers there. But it seems like at least explainable AI, it gives us the tools to even start having those conversations.
Exactly. Transparency is essential if we're going to build trust and have those clear lines of accountability. And it also opens the door to making AI more inclusive. If more people understand how AI works, they're going to feel more empowered to, use it, shape it, and contribute to developing it.
It's like taking AI out of the hands of like just a select few and making it accessible to everyone.
That's exactly it. We can move away from this idea of AI being this mysterious force that only tech experts understand. Explainability can actually democratize AI, make it a tool that, everyone can use and benefit from.
This has been such an awesome deep dive. I'm walking away from this with like a whole new appreciation for how important explainable AI is. Not just for understanding how AI works, but like for shaping its role in our lives in the future.
I totally agree. We're really just at the beginning of this journey into, the world of explainable AI. And it's really exciting to think about all the possibilities as we keep developing, even more sophisticated ways to understand how AI makes decisions. We can build a future where AI is a force for good, a tool that helps us solve those really complex problems and, create a better world.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of explainable AI. We hope you found it insightful. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.